Hey guys, welcome back. In this week's lesson, I want to talk about some of the biggest challenges involved in teaching young learners and how to overcome those challenges. So let's go. The first thing I want to talk about is motivating your young learners. So this can be one of the most difficult things to do, especially when you go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and you've got a room full of sleepy teenagers staring at you. So the first thing we need to know about motivation is it's so important to frame your lesson in an engaging topic, so something that your learners can relate to. A great way of doing this is by using pop culture. Think about popular singers, actors, etc., to get their attention. It's also important to personalize the topic. So if you're talking about music, great, an interesting topic. You can talk about lots of famous songs, singers, bands, but it's very important, especially at the beginning of the lesson, to personalize. So, for example, in this music lesson, you could ask them, what's your favorite song? Do you have a favorite band? Favorite type of music? Get the learners engaged in the lesson. Get them invested. For sports, who's your favorite athlete? Your favorite football player, favorite team, etc. Okay. It's also important to make the lesson relevant to your learners' needs. So the only way we can do this is by taking some time to actually get to know what your learners' interests are. So for example, if you've got a class full of music lovers, but they're not, a particularly physically active class, they're not that interested in sport, a lesson about sport probably won't be that well received. So just by knowing your learners' interests, you'll be better able to choose a topic that you know will more easily engage them. Uh, and just an important point about these first three points here. I guess these are all related to theory developed by Stephen Krashen, who's a leading second language scholar. And basically, his theory, he developed a concept called the effective filter. And what this is he believed some factors could actually prevent learners from, they could actually block learners from absorbing knowledge during the lesson. So things like low self-confidence, anxiety, or fear of judgment, these all act to increase the effective filter. So as teachers, what we can do is we can actively try to lower this effective filter. And these are all good ways of doing this. Another way we can lower the effective filter is by tapping into the learner's existing knowledge. So just to go back to the point about music, teenagers can be fantastically talented. They all have some amazing talents. Maybe one of them is a talented musician. Ask them about it. You can get them to share their experience. Ask them about their skills, how long they've been learning. And even just by encouraging the learners to share information like this, it can act to not only get them interested in the lesson, but also raise their own self-confidence and therefore lower the effective filter. And just finally, it's important to challenge your learners. Don't play it too safe. Don't make it too easy. Nothing, nothing kills motivation like a lack of challenge. That can lead to boredom, and there's really nothing worse for motivation. But just on this point, be careful too, not to go too far in the other direction. You don't want the tasks to be too difficult, so difficult that your learners just think there's no way I can do this, because of course that can also lead to a decrease in their motivation. So I guess what we should be aiming for is tasks that will challenge your learners but are still doable. This can create a sense of reward, and just that feeling of reward they get for completing a challenging task, it's kind of addictive, and that feeling can increase motivation further. Nowadays you always see in apps, on your phone, these step counters. Congratulations, you've got the badge for completing 10,000 steps. And the reason they do this is they know it's addictive. They know it's motivating. I've got to this stage. I want to keep going. I want to get to the next stage. And the same principle can work in the ELT classroom. Okay. The next, I guess, obstacle or challenge we face when teaching young learners, in particular teenagers, can be classroom management. So, one thing I've found quite effective in the past is placing a degree of trust in the learners themselves. So, for example, with one class I had before a couple of years ago, I think it was a 2-month course. So in the first lesson with these learners, teenagers, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, I put them into groups and I said, okay guys, you're going to create the rules for the class and we're going to follow them. And so it's giving the learners a lot of trust, but I was, pleasantly impressed with how responsible they were when creating the rules. Things like no cell phones, only English in the classroom. And we had a feedback session. All the groups shared their ideas, and then we chose the best rules, made a list, and put it up on the wall. And those rules stayed on the wall for the duration of their course. And what this actually did was took some of the strain off me constantly enforcing rules. You must not do this, you must do that. Because the learners themselves, because they were their rules that they had thought of, they were actually enforcing them. So if they saw their partner maybe taking out a phone, they'd say, stop, look at the rule. Or, someone started speaking their L1. Again, it was actually the learners that were correcting each other. And it created a really nice atmosphere in the classroom, an atmosphere that was very conducive to effective learning. So that worked particularly well for me in the past, so it could be worth a try. Another good way to manage is by creating reward systems. So we've already talked a little bit about this, so I guess, one thing a colleague of mine tried in the past, he's a fantastic teacher, he developed this system where he had 4 groups in the classroom. So every student belonged to one of these groups. To say, the cats, the dogs, the lions, the tigers. And good behavior by an individual student led to a point being added to that group's score. So that way the students were really motivated to not let their team down. They knew good work, good behavior, it's going to increase their team's score. And again, it led to this feeling of healthy competition in the classroom. The cats wanted to be better than the dogs, the lions wanted to be better than the tigers. All these groups wanted to finish the week at the top of the leaderboard, I guess. So it's a bit of extra work on behalf of the teacher. You need to keep track of the points of each team. But for this former colleague of mine, it worked incredibly well. His classes were always super motivated, and I think it also helped him to develop a really good rapport with the students, and, amongst the students themselves too. Of course, we're always going to get difficult students, unfortunately. So it's really important as teachers that when we inevitably encounter these students, we deal with them in the correct way. So basically, we need to be aware of things like tone of voice. Also, when we decide to correct them, is it a student who, maybe is particularly low in confidence, maybe low self-esteem? So maybe for this particular student, it might be better to wait until after the class to make your criticism, or make your complaint to the student alone rather than in front of their peers. Also, as a teacher, we need to set a good example. So, do you text in class? Do you eat? If you're doing these things as a teacher, then you can't really expect to enforce these rules for your students. The students will look at you and they say, but you're texting. So it's important to set a good example too. Why should they follow the rules if the teacher is constantly breaking them? So again, yeah, choose the best time to discipline. Be confident. Be consistent. Don't treat one learner differently to another. I remember from when I was a teenager, I had a very strong sense of injustice. So if I felt somebody was getting better treatment than me, I'd get this feeling of resentment. So in a classroom as a teacher, this is something we want to avoid. We don't want our students to have. So it's important to treat everyone in the same way. Be confident, but also consistent. And again, lead by example. Okay. Another challenge can be dealing with over talkers. I think we've probably all had students like this in the past who like to dominate the interaction. Uh, so yeah, one colleague of mine had a nice way of dealing with these kinds of students. Just wait for them to reach the end of their thought or their point. Just politely thank them and move on. Pretty simple. Thank you, and elicit some other opinions, or move on to the next activity. Um, all right, just one more point here about rearranging the seating. So social dynamics can play a really, really big part in behavior in the classroom. So it's important to pay attention to where your students are sitting. Where are the disruptive students sitting? You usually find them sitting beside each other. And sometimes addressing this problem can be as simple as just rearranging the seating. It can completely neutralize the problem. And it's important to do this regularly. Not only, to deal with disruptive students, but also, the more variety you have in your lesson, the more different students your students are interacting with, the less bored they'll be, and the easier it will be to keep their motivation levels up and keep them engaged in the lesson. Also, if they look particularly sleepy, sometimes I just rearrange the class. It can be as simple as number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, number 1s, you two guys together. Number 2s, you two guys together, etc. Keep changing it. Finally, it's important to remember to enjoy the experience of teaching young learners. It can be incredibly rewarding too. So when planning activities, I always think it's important, if I'm planning activities for my class. And of course, this doesn't only apply to young learners. Would I enjoy doing this particular activity? Or would I find it really, really boring? If the answer is I'd find it really, really boring, well then I guess there's a chance my learners would too. So how can I make it more interesting? How can I make it more engaging? It's also important to remember, to be aware of different learner styles. So me personally, I'm more of a kinesthetic learner. I love to move around, be active, kind of games, running dictations, things like that, they really appeal to me. I'm also more of an interpersonal learner, so I really enjoy working with other people. But of course, amongst your class, you can have a variety of different learner styles. Not everybody likes to move around. Some people prefer to work alone than work with others. So I guess the most effective way to deal with all these different learner styles in your class is when you're planning a lesson, include a variety of activities that appeal to each of the different learner styles. So if, for example, you're an interpersonal learner, have some activities that involve students working alone, whilst at the same time you'll have activities that involve students working together. So the more of these different learner styles you can target in your planning, the better. And again, the more variety you'll have in your lesson and the more engaged the students will be. And speaking of variety, so important to have variety in your lessons. If there's no variety, the lesson is predictable. Predictability kills motivation. So I don't know, examples of variety, include some music. Again, I'm a big believer of technology in the classroom. So if you're fortunate enough to have an interactive whiteboard, you could have some short videos, discussions based on the videos, or use a YouTube video to elicit some target language, develop it, etc. So just important to have variety. You don't want your students to arrive and be doing the same type of activity for the whole class. Again, predictability ruins lessons. And yeah, exploit your learners' talents. So I mentioned this earlier. Everybody has talents, everybody has gifts. So it's really important to exploit these gifts. If you know a student is a talented musician, ask them about their talent. Ask them to share some experience. If you know there's a talented athlete, do the same thing. Really encourage them to talk about these talents, or to showcase them. But just be careful on this point. So finding out that one of your students is a brilliant singer is one thing. However, if you demand that this person gets up and sings a song in English in front of the class, that's not really, it may not appeal to everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It could be one person's dream come true, and it could be another learner's worst nightmare. So just be aware of the individual learner you're speaking with. So, don't pressurize teenagers in particular to showcase what they can do unless they want to do it, or they'll be happy to do it. And also giving learners an opportunity to showcase their talents. If they want to showcase them, it can be really rewarding for the learner, but also for you as the teacher too. All right, guys, thank you very, very much for watching this week's lesson. Just the important things to remember: motivate. So remember, lower that affective filter, manage, and most importantly, enjoy the experience. Thanks a million for watching. Any feedback, suggestions, comments, please share in the live chat or under the video on YouTube. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Have a great week, guys. Cheers.